Let's bring in Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, Harmeet Dhillon. Harmeet, it's wonderful to see you. I don't want you to discuss the case of the 8 senators who appear to have been illegally surveilled by the DOJ, FBI, and with the help of some unnamed phone companies. I don't want you to talk about that case because I know you can't. But let's just discuss concepts. If I were a special counsel and I wanted to track, let's say, phone calls of any American, not just, senators or otherwise, there's a basic checklist of things that I need that any first-year law student can rattle off. What would I need to get a judge to sign off on to compel phone companies to hand over that data and to proceed with an investigation like this?
Well, thanks for asking, Chris. You would typically need to show that there is probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed by those citizens. And we are now hearing the outrage from these senators who are rightfully upset about separation of powers issues, as well as, obviously, just surveilling them for doing their jobs. But this has been happening to hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans since the last several years now. And we've had a DOJ in the prior administration that was completely out of control. There's supposed to be checks and balances when any political figure is investigated by the DOJ. It's very clearly set forth in our manuals that we follow. And so I would think that a lot of this stuff had to have happened at the highest levels. I'm not going to speculate more about that, but I will say that it seems to be a gross abuse of power to simply surveil dozens or hundreds of Americans for perfectly legal behavior.
You bring up such a wonderful point. Now, I am upset that Marsha Blackburn may have been surveilled illegally by the Democrats that infested our government. But you know what? I'm a million times more ticked off, a million times more upset that anybody in government would do that to one of my fellow citizens, just some Tom, Dick, and Harry out there who happen to be wearing a MAGA hat. That's what really ticks me off. Now, look, let's you and I pivot to James Comey. People like Peter Navarro, Roger Stone, that Catholic father in Pennsylvania, Mark Houck, remember him? That they were met with armed agents in shackles for lesser charges. But Comey, here he is, man, he's walking her into the court like he owns the place, which was, let me just ask you, which was the lawfully prescribed treatment and which was the political overreach? And shouldn't those who violated those norms be out of a job or prosecuted if they broke the laws?
Well, it definitely was a violation of protocols to have these sort of shock and awe armed guards, and CNN watching when Roger Stone was arrested, having people like Jeffrey Clark out in the street and having his little children stand out in the street and be terrorized while the media is watching. That's an outrageous abuse of power, and it's overreach. And any kind of white-collar crime situation where somebody's being accused of, oh my goodness, signing some memo that somebody else disagreed with, there's no harm to the public there. And so similarly with James Comey, that's the appropriate way that law enforcement should behave. I know people want vengeance. They want to see him shackled and punished and humiliated. That isn't really the American way. So hopefully we can all dial it back and behave appropriately in these types of circumstances. And I don't know how the government can apologize to Roger Stone and others for the unnecessary humiliation that they were put through. It was completely wrong and un-American.
Yes, absolutely. Those who made the calls, here's how they can apologize. Those who made those calls can be fired, prohibited from ever serving in government ever again, and maybe civilly prosecuted. That's a good start. Today, President Trump held a roundtable on Antifa. Watch.
It should be clear to all Americans that we have a very serious left-wing terror threat in our country. Radicals associated with the domestic terror group Antifa that you've heard a lot about lately, and I've heard a lot about them for 10 years. And other far-left extremists have been carrying out a campaign of violence against ICE agents and other officials charged with enforcing federal law.
Now, after President Trump declared Antifa a terror organization, the Democrats responded by saying that Antifa really doesn't exist. It's just an idea. That begs the question, how is an idea giving people black eyes in Portland, beating people, burning down buildings? Does Antifa meet the legal definition of a terrorist organization?
Well, I believe it does, and it's certainly an organized crime organization. You know, some would say disorganized into cells, but look, I've actually sued Portland Antifa and several of the criminals who assaulted my good friend Andy Ngo and client who's there as part of that roundtable today. I can assure you that the injuries inflicted on Andy and other journalists there are very real. And the organization of this entity with like very sophisticated leaders who fly around the country and cause problems all over the country, it is very real. It is very scary, and it poses a direct threat to our national security if left unchecked. So I'm thrilled as an American and proud as a DOJ official to see the leadership of Pam Bondi and the president in ensuring that we're going to use all necessary resources to go after this terror threat in our cities.
And conservatives are thrilled about you, I got to be honest, because I'm talking about conservative influencer and myself, Nick Sortor. He was over the moon after he was arrested, learning that you would be investigating what happened here. While violent Antifa thugs were allowed to get off scot-free, he's arrested. The arrest of Sortor was so flimsy, the left-wing DA out there in Portland declined to bring charges. Shouldn't there be consequences, though, for a rogue police department that appears to be making politically motivated arrests?
Well, there should be, and I will tell you that Mr. Sortor has retained counsel, and I'm sure that there is probably going to be a civil suit forthcoming for the violation of his First Amendment rights. But he's one of many journalists who've been attacked, scapegoated, and had the police stand by and watch. And by the way, not to blame the police are acting under the direction of the political leadership in the city. They're also under a federal consent decree that was issued by the Obama administration a long time ago. It's still active, and that is the basis under which I immediately opened a federal civil rights investigation into what's going on currently on the ground in Portland. We issued a document request that's very detailed. Portland has to comply with it. Portland triggered a mediation that occurred earlier today that was unfruitful, and so now we're going to make sure that Portland complies and gives us the data, and we will make sure that the policing is done appropriately in that city to the maximum extent possible within federal law. And you cannot, as police and as a city, go after journalists while you allow criminal gangs to run free. That is not a thing we can do here in America.
And that's why conservatives are so happy that you're doing what you're doing, because the rule of law is prevailing once again. Now, you just delivered opening arguments in USA versus Oropesa. It's a criminal case involving pro-lifers and pregnancy centers. Tell us how that's going to impact Americans and our civil rights.
Yes, we had a very interesting case in the 11th Circuit yesterday. It's not normal typically for someone at my level to actually go argue the cases, but I'm very passionate as a lawyer about all of these issues. And so this is a very interesting case about a group called Jane's Revenge. Jane's Revenge was a pro-abortion group that formed in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decisions, and they attacked a number of crisis pregnancy centers around the country. And as you know, there are many of them there in Florida. So Florida was a hotbed of this type of activity, and this group of conspirators attacked several crisis pregnancy centers there. There was a federal prosecution in the last administration. A conviction was had earlier this year of the one person who went to trial, Ms. Oropesa, and we're defending that conviction on the grounds that it's appropriate to use the venerable post-Civil War Klan Act to go after people who put on masks and go about and terrorize people in conspiracies to violate their individual civil rights. So this is the first time that a court of appeals is deciding this issue. We had a really interesting argument down in Atlanta, and we're looking forward to the outcome.
Great job. And I remember the church bombings, the fire bombings of these pregnancy centers, of these pro-life pregnancy centers, that the previous regime decided they wouldn't prosecute, and the corrupt FBI wouldn't prosecute under that regime. And hopefully that injustice is going to be righted as well. Harmeet Dhillon, always great talking with you. Come back soon. You know, folks, I thank God for my wonderful wife, my kids, my country, the greatest nation ever. And Americans like you who believe in the truth, the Chris Salcedo Show will never stop fighting for you.
The Chris Salcedo Show, for the news you need to know.